Rugged smartphones are one of the most interesting parts of the smartphone market. Almost none can go toe-to-toe with any flagship smartphone, but then again they're not really designed to. Most are large form factor with long battery lives, and they are designed to take a beating. Many incorporate some kind of special tool or feature that would be only useful to the trade or outdoor market that they are aimed at. The Doogee S97 Pro ticks every one of these boxes. It is huge, it has a massive battery life, it is tough as nails, and it has a laser rangefinder built directly into the phone. It's clearly aimed at tradespeople, but the MediaTek Helio G95 chip running the show makes it a speedy handset in its own right. It is currently available at a starting price of just $267, also making it one of the, on paper, best value phones in terms of features, speed and battery life. My name is Ian, and in this Make Use Of review, we are going to see if the Doogee S97 Pro measures up to the competition. So before we get going, why should you care what I think about a rugged smartphone? Well, I have been a rugged smartphone enthusiast for a number of years. I have used them in work as well. I've used them in theatres, in music festivals and on building sites. Perhaps more crucially, I've used them around a variety of small children who are the ultimate destroyers of all unwatched technology. But I've also used and reviewed a large variety of rugged tech in general. I know what claims are worth paying attention to, along with what marketing claims are sort of worth taking with a bit of a pinch of salt. I test things thoroughly, and that has resulted in me being blacklisted by one unnamed vendor for giving their rugged device a low score for breaking under what I deemed to be completely fair and normal circumstances. This particular review is a little different as well, as my faithful smartphone that I've used for a long time died just as I received this phone, so I ended up using the S97 Pro as my daily driver for longer than most reviewers would. I suspect that's why I've noticed some things about this phone that I've not seen reported anywhere else. The S97 Pro is a dual SIM Android 11 handset with a 6.39-inch Corning Gorilla Glass screen and an 8500 mAh battery that supports up to 33 watts fast charging and a 10-watt wireless charging as well. The version I tested comes with 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, which can be increased via a micro SD card, though you will lose one of those SIM slots if you choose to do that. You also get NFC, Bluetooth 5, Face Unlock, a side-mounted fingerprint sensor, and all of the standard features you would expect on a modern Android phone. Now, it does have 4 rear-mounted cameras, a 48-megapixel main camera, a 2-megapixel portrait camera, a 2-megapixel macro lens, and an 8-megapixel wide-angle lens, along with 4 white LEDs which act as a torch and a camera flash. In the box you get a fairly beefy fast charger, a USB-C charging cable, a wrist strap, and a little SIM bay removal tool, along with some screen protectors. So what sets the Doogee S97 Pro aside, apart from the rangefinder, which we'll get onto, is its size. It's pretty massive. It's 6.7 by 3.3 by 0.6 inches. It does fit in my pocket with my keys, but only just. The thickness is what does it. It's a really thick phone, but that size is somewhat of an asset because that thickness is the battery, and that battery allows you to watch videos on its big screen pretty much all day long. The onboard speaker is more than good enough for watching things even at a bit of a distance, and of course a larger screen allows you to do that. Bluetooth connectivity is a bit of a different matter, and that's one we will get onto. Another thing that sets this phone aside is that it apparently has an onboard formaldehyde detector. I haven't seen any documentation for how that actually works and how it warns you if you come into contact with it. And it does also have 2 extra side-mounted buttons. One is customizable by the user, and the other one is for triggering the rangefinder when the app is open. Speaking of the rangefinder, it is the key feature of the S97 Pro. It's gimmick that they're selling it on. So the important question is, well, does it work? Well, the short answer is yes. It works as well as any low-budget rangefinder will work. It works indoors, and there's a lot of circumstances indoors that will give you very dodgy readings. That's actually a problem with most laser rangefinders in the S97 Pro's defense. Even name brand budget rangefinders have those issues. That said, they have a video comparison with the Bosch GLM40, a higher cost laser rangefinder used widely by venue staff and theatre technicians and set builders. I've used them a lot. It seems like an interesting comparison. It's an aesthetic choice, really, that they had this video comparison, because they do have their own video comparison, but Doogee's own store page claims a 3cm accuracy variation on the S97 Pro's rangefinder, while the Bosch dedicated rangefinder is accurate down to 1.5mm. The promo video claims the S97 Pro is just as accurate as the Bosch GLM40, and well, it's not. But that said, it's more than accurate enough for many short-range indoor uses, and on a phone at this price, it is a nice addition. It's just a shame they're trying to market it as an actual tool, as something more, when it isn't. Now, is it actually rugged? Well, before we get to that, most manufacturers of rugged devices claim this MIL STD 810G standard. You'll see it everywhere. But you should know that this is purely an aesthetic thing. Yes, rugged manufacturers follow military device testing protocols, but they do it in-house. The military itself has nothing to do with consumer phones. So in this particular case, Doogee is telling you that their phone has a military certification that Doogee gave the phone after Doogee tested it. That said, the S97 Pro is as bomb-proof as pretty much any other phone Doogee makes, and it's stacked up to all of the usual punishment that these reviews dish out. It is a solid brick which took all normal day-to-day use in its stride and some very overzealous dropping onto a variety of surfaces, along with the usual water and dust test that IP68 and IP69K ratings should be able to take. It took all of them in its stride. Anyway, it was absolutely fine. After everything that I've put this through, I've given this a wash in the sink, and as you can probably see, this thing still looks fantastic. By the way, if you noticed at any point that there was scratches on the screen during the footage of this review, that was purely on the screen protector. And one of the things I tend to do with phones like this is a test to see how strong the actual glass is. And in doing that test, the screen protectors get wrecked, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I took the screen protector. It currently doesn't have a screen protector on. I took that screen protector off, and you can see the Gorilla Glass, apart from a few fingerprints, is completely untouched. The covers that you put on your screens, they won't stop your glass from shattering in any circumstances. The screen is obviously tough. In my mind, a rugged phone needs to be, of course, rugged. It also has to have a couple of other features. One is side buttons and the other is face unlock. And that's very important. If you're using this in a rugged environment, you'll probably be wearing gloves. You want to be able to unlock the phone without typing in passwords, and you want to be able to use basic features like Google and, of course, the rangefinder without having to touch the screen as well. In this capacity, the Doogee S97 Pro passes on all fronts. I also quite like the approach they've taken to the charging port. There's various different things that different manufacturers have done over time. Some just go completely bare and say that you can get the charging port wet, just make sure you dry it first. Some give little plugs. This little flap that they have on the S97 Pro, I think that's a really, really good approach for doing it. It feels like a good seal, and I had never had any problems with water ingress during this review. And yeah, it's not too hard it's just hard enough to kind of flip out to get the charging cable in. That part of it, I think, is really well designed. The rugged element of this phone is fantastic. However, ruggedness aside, there's also the feel of this phone if you were to use it every day, as I did. And unfortunately, this is sort of where things start to fall apart a little for the S97 Pro. But before we get into that, let's just talk about some of the good things, because general use is incredibly snappy. There was no slowdown whatsoever while moving between apps, and it has good background memory management courtesy of Android. That stops things from getting bogged down at any point. Mid to high intensity Android games just ran without any issue whatsoever. I don't play any really high intensity ones, so I can't help you there too much. But the large screen is fantastic for general media and gaming, watching videos, and the huge battery is an asset there too. You can go for days without charging this thing, and even if you do need to charge it, the quick charging means you can top it up briefly and get an entire other day out of it rather than just the few more hours that you would get with other phones. It's a really nice touch. Unfortunately, there are some glaring problems here that make the S97 not all that fun to use as a daily driver. Connectivity is probably the biggest. I live in a pretty small flat, but I was getting Wi-Fi drops frequently, sometimes in the same room as the router, and this hasn't happened with any other device. Using Bluetooth and Wi-Fi at the same time will cause one or the other to instantly lose connection, and using Bluetooth outside on network data is a little bit better, but it still gives off all of the artifacts of a poor connection. And this is with headphones that I know to work perfectly well with multiple other handsets. Now, as I've said several times, I use this phone as my daily driver, and that might be why I'm noticing problems here that I haven't really seen reported anywhere else. Like, for example, this might seem like such a tiny detail, but when I was setting up Google Pay, because the phone has NFC, I couldn't use the automated setup because not one of the 4 rear cameras could focus on my card. Now, I know that sounds like a tiny detail, but here's another one. You know, the side buttons are incredibly light and easy to press. That means I'd frequently pull the phone out of my pocket and find that the power button had been pressed and then the reset button on the screen had been hit in my pocket, and I'd have to unlock my SIM before I could receive calls and messages. Now, that issue in a phone is quite hard to ignore. After all, a rugged phone should be able to at least stay switched on in an environment as dangerous as my pocket with some keys in it. If you have ever been in your life in a position where it is vitally important that you do receive a phone call, just throwing out an abstract example here, like a 9-month pregnant partner who might need to ring you quite quickly, a telephone a telephone designed to travel in a pocket, it should just be able to travel in a pocket in standby mode. I don't think I'm nitpicking too much when I say that's a big issue. Funnily enough, I've only had this exact problem with one other phone, and it was another very, very similar budget rugged phone, but from a different manufacturer. So this might not be a Doogee S97 Pro issue only, but it is still a pretty big issue and one that I couldn't let fly, really. So as previously mentioned, the camera didn't play nice with Google Pay, but the camera itself is okay, actually. If you're using the camera outside, you're going to get some good photos. It's not going to come close to any flagship phones. It's also not going to come close to things like the Pixel 4a, which is a budget phone, but it's a Google budget phone, so yeah. There are a few cheap phones that can compare with that. But yeah, the normal photographs from the 48 megapixel main and the 16 megapixel selfie camera are fair. Muted lighting does cause large drops in quality, and the same is true for the 4K video recording, which is completely passable, but there is a noticeable stepping effect in brightness compensation when changing light levels. It's okay for day-to-day use, but fairly average when compared to other budget phones in recent years. It's just kind of there in the middle. What makes up for it somewhat, is the 2 megapixel macro and 8 megapixel wide angle modes. Now, macro lenses are fantastic additions to phones in general. They allow you to get such high detail close-ups of things on the fly. It's a great combination with the phone. And this one, it works functionally like a fixed focus lens. With a little work, you can get some really wonderful images. However, for whatever reason, the macro mode doesn't allow you to turn the flash on at the same time as using the macro lens, which can cause problems when the phone blocks out the light as you get close. But when you're outside, that's less of an issue usually. The wide-angle camera is also nice. The images aren't any noticeably lower quality than the main lens, which is slightly worrying given how much less megapixels it is. But it's a great way to pack a lot into a single photo. So for reference, this wide-angle shot was taken from the same position as this regular photo, and I took both of these photos just to give a sense of scale for this macro shot. So should you get this phone? I mean, I know I've come across as quite negative with a few of the points, but I have to stress that for the money, you are getting a lot of phone for your money. If you are looking for a basic Android phone that can be used while wearing gloves and take a bashing, has an insanely huge battery life. I've used it for 4 days on the trot, you know. The S97 Pro might well be for you. Just make sure it gets its own pocket and you'll be fine. You will get a lot of fun out of the macro lens too, and the distance measurement tool has some use in getting ballpark figures, I would say. But if you are hoping that this phone will act as a useful tool, then it's probably not for you. Because the idea behind it is great. It is a phone that can not only survive harsh working environments, but has actual utility as a tool within them. Unfortunately, if you already work in those environments, you are very unlikely to want to trust a budget rugged smartphone to things like accurate measurement, that's how you do your job well, and toxic substance detection. You want industry grade tools for that and not a budget rugged smartphone. For most everyday users, all of these issues would be forgivable if you just treat it as a large form factor rugged phone with a big battery life. Unfortunately, in my experience, the combination of the weak side buttons, average main camera, and shoddy connectivity makes it less than ideal for your average day-to-day use as well. Now, this isn't entirely just on Doogee. I want to be clear. This is a product of the rugged smartphone market in general. This is a problem right now. So many rugged phones come with a standout feature that in reality isn't actually all that useful to have built into a phone. It seems to me that if someone brought out a phone at this price with no gimmicks, just tough as nails with a massive battery life and crucially a fantastic camera, then it would be a really useful daily phone and it would probably do really well. It's a shame as well because I'm a big fan of Doogee. I don't want you to think I don't like Doogee's products. I love their approach and they've made some fantastic phones. It's just that unfortunately the S97 Pro isn't one of them. If you found this review useful, consider subscribing to the Make Use Of YouTube channel. We have reviewed a lot of rugged products, but we review a lot of everything else as well. And if there are any points in this video that you didn't really agree with, I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section below. I do understand that I am somewhat opinionated, but then again, that is the job of the reviewer to have opinions. There's also a written version of this review that you can find in the description of the video. But for now, my name is Ian, this is Make Use Of. I hope you're having a great day. Take care.